What's going on, everybody? I'm HoopsandHipHop, and welcome back to another episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. In last week's episode, we talked about, I believe it was Zarude and Pokemon Day. Yeah, it definitely was that, because last week was Pokemon Day week. My calendar, the days are just flying they're flying by so quickly, man. This podcast is off to a great start. Good job, Hoops. You're doing fantastic. The days are just flying by so quick. It's March already. Winter is almost over, so sometimes you kind of just lose track of time. But that is indeed what we talked about last week. We talked about Zarude, we talked about Pokemon of the Year results and the breakdown for every region, most popular Pokemon, all that kind of stuff. And overall, we just kind of talked about the festivities that went on at Pokemon Day. This week, because genuinely we have ran out of all things to cover when it comes to current happenings in Pokemon. I've typically used this podcast as a way to talk about what's currently happening in Pokemon and my gut reaction to it and my extended reaction and all that type of stuff. That's usually what I like to talk about because it just kind of makes the most sense for a podcast in my opinion. But because we have kind of ran dry on all of those topics, at least for now, I am going to actually talk about something that I was going to talk about in a video on my own channel, but then things happened that basically ruined those plans, but I still think it's a really interesting topic, so I'm going to talk about it here. But before we do that, I do need to thank the sponsor of UCast Studios and of this podcast specifically, because they help us a ton. They help us do what we do, so they're very much appreciated. And with that being said, today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. Tax season is here, and that means it's time to file your taxes. There's good news though, because if you're a W-2 employee, you can save half off of your filing. All you have to do is call the Tax Defense Group before April 15th, 2020, and mention that you heard this ad, not saw this ad, on UCast Studios. Millions of Americans are going to get back money after they file, and you can be one of them if you call the Tax Defense Group today at 800-850-7973. That number again is 800-850-7973, or you can visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Are you looking to make more money in 2020? Because one of the best ways to do that is by having a new resume that can help you get that dream job. Writer Junkie offers affordable, well-written resumes for the low cost of just $145. They'll even throw in a cover letter for no additional charge. All you have to do is mention that you heard this ad on UCast Studios, and they will get right to work. So call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online as well at writerjunkie.com. Alright, so to go over this Pokemon topic that I was going to talk about, but then didn't get to talk about, but now I'm going to talk about it again because I just want to, right before the expansion pass for Sword and Shield was announced, I had this idea for a video where I was going to talk about how Pokemon Sword and Shield is just absolutely perfect for a sequel. It's just begging for a sequel. And I didn't get to do that, obviously, because literally 2 days later, I had this video recorded and everything. I recorded the script, I was ready to go, because this was right around the time when they announced that there was going to be a Pokemon Direct, and this was in January, 2 months after the games had come out. Not even technically 2 months. And I was like, okay, this is really weird, but there's no way in heck this is going to be anything main series related, because we're not even 2 months removed from Sword and Shield. There's no way it's going to be anything main series related. I should be good to go. So I went ahead, recorded that video, and lo and behold, we got the expansion pass. They threw a curveball at us, and that effectively ruined my chances to do that video, because with the expansion pass happening, obviously more than likely not going to get a sequel, so that kind of just squashed my video. But I've been thinking about it just here and there over the past few weeks, and I guess technically months now, and I have just like, I genuinely still kind of like get excited about this idea and this prospect when I think about it, because really and truly, Sword and Shield, even though we're most likely not going to get a sequel of any kind, it would have been so perfect. Like, it would have been beyond perfect. I know that, like, currently in Pokemon, there is a lot of talk about, like, oh, we want a sequel to this game, or we want a sequel to that game, or something like that, because, like, people really like the idea of sequels in when it comes to anything, people really like the idea of sequels. But I think in Pokemon, especially just because the one time they did a sequel with Black and White 2, it was really good, and then they never did it again. So it kind of has people just wanting more. We want more, like, continuation of stories. That's really kind of what we're sort of begging for almost as a fan base. And so with that kind of desire in the air, like, people will take a sequel for anything. And legitimately, like I said, you can make a sequel for anything. But Sword and Shield, like, stands out amongst that crowd just, like, by a mile, in my opinion. Because even though you could make a sequel out of any Pokemon game and have it be good, Sword and Shield was practically set up for a sequel. Like, it was it legitimately, like, was constructed as if they were going to make a sequel. And then obviously we got the expansion pass instead. I'm not saying that they were going to do a sequel. That's not what I'm trying to, like, propose. I'm just saying that contributes to, like, how perfectly this game, like, could have, like, how perfectly it was set up for a sequel, and how perfect a sequel would have been, because it literally sets itself up for a sequel even if it didn't intend it. So we're just going to go through that. I'm going to tell you guys why it would have been so perfect, why it would have been so great in my opinion, and that is going to be the discussion today. So without any further ado, yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. So the reason why I think Sword and Shield would have been so great as a sequel is because there's a lot of things there in the game that basically allude to the fact that they could be developed, and they're, like, the plot lines and the stories could be developed in the future, in a future title. For instance, you have so much character development going on in this game. We start off with, and this is going to be spoilers, obviously, I'm going to be talking about things that happen at the end of the game, so if you have not played Sword and Shield yet, and you don't want to be spoiled, here is your warning. But starting with Hop, obviously he has his own arc within Sword and Shield. He struggles to be as good as he wants to be as good as his brother Leon, who's the champion, and then ultimately at the end of the game, he decides that he wants to actually be a professor instead, and ultimately becomes Sonia's assistant, because Sonia becomes the professor, and we're going to talk about her as well. So, like, that kind of character development is just so fascinating and awesome to see a character progress and end up in a new role by the end of the game like that. And so, if you were to make, like, that's just, once again, begging for true sequel. That's just true sequel material right there, because he ends up in that role at the end of the game. And so you can make a sequel, like, 3 years into the future, where he truly is, like, maybe, like, Sonia's top assistant, or maybe he's even some kind of professor himself at that point, and you would actually get to see him, like, flourish in that role after just entering into it at the end of the game. Same thing goes for Sonia. At the end of the game, she actually becomes Galar's professor, taking over for her grandmother, who effectively retired, and throughout the game, she was kind of, like, prepping Sonia to become that, and then she does right at the end of the game, which, once again, is pure sequel material, because she enters into this, like, fantastic and very important for the Pokemon games role right at the end of the game, and then you really don't get to see her be in that role. Like, yeah, she is the assistant throughout the game, so you get to see her doing, like, professor science-y type of stuff, but you really don't get to see her be the professor. Like, she's not the one in the game, even though she's sort of doing that kind of stuff. So if you do Sword and Shield 2, 3, maybe even 5 years in the future, where she's really into it now, like, it would just be so awesome, once again, to see her in that role that she just barely squeaked into at the end of the game and really see her flourish in it in a follow-up sequel title. The same thing goes, like, there's so many characters in Sword and Shield that got character development like this, and it was one of the best things about Sword and Shield, but it would have just had the cherry on top to it all if we actually got to see how they developed moving on. And another pair of characters that are like that are Bede and Marnie. Bede obviously goes through his own arc in the games. He, once again, right at the end of the game, ends up as a gym leader, and even though you do get to battle him when he is effectively the gym leader, you don't get to battle him as the gym leader. He is not the guy who gives you the fairy badge in the game. Like, that happens, he becomes the gym leader after that. So, once again, this is another instance, same thing we've been talking about, where he's in a new role, he's grown, he's become something new, and it's right at the end of the game. So if you were to do another game 3 years in the future where he's truly come into his own, he's truly the fairy gym leader, and you get to battle him as the fairy gym leader, that is an out-of-this-world scenario for a Pokemon game. Like, that is like a home run, grand slam, out-of-the-park type of thing, where we get to see characters from the previous game grown up, not just by, like, their age, but also grown into a new role, and they're, like, flourishing in it. This is kind of like Gold and Silver, almost, where you obviously had Blue in Red and Blue, and he went through his own like arc, if you will, as being your rival, and then he was the champion at the end, and then in Gold and Silver, you get to see him as a gym leader. So, like, he's that familiar face in a new role that you get to kind of re-experience, and it's just really fun to be able to do that. And they could do that to, like, the umpteenth degree with the Sword and Shield sequel. The same thing goes for Marnie as well. She doesn't have, like, quite the dramatic, like, angle that Bede's storyline does, but she does end up the same way in that she's a gym leader at the end of the game, and you don't get to battle her as a gym leader. So being able to see her 3 years down the road as a gym leader, especially with the kids too, like with Hop, Sonia, and not Sonia, Hop, Bede, and Marnie, these are all like kids. They're probably like 12-ish years old, maybe 10 to 12, something around there. So you add 3 years onto that, they're legit teenagers now, and that's the time of your life where you grow the most. So we'd actually get to see them age significantly in addition to growing into their own in their new roles, which would be fantastic. It's always super fun to watch characters age. Like, it really is this, it's really the type of thing that hits you in the feels if you're really a fan of something. So, like, that would just be so fantastic, and it just blows my mind how well Sword and Shield did this in terms of developing their characters, but I feel like it's almost criminal to develop your characters that well and then just cut it off right there and don't finish their development by showing them flourishing in the role that they ended up in at the end of the game. It's a golden opportunity that most likely is not going to get capitalized on because of the expansion, and don't get me wrong, I am beyond hyped for the expansion. Galarian legendaries, new Regis, new areas to explore, new Galarian legendaries, a lot of new characters, minor league gym leaders are being factored into it. Literally a dream come true. Like, the Sword and Shield expansion is absolutely a dream come true, but it also takes away a dream come true at the same time, which sucks, and it just goes to show you how many amazing possibilities there are for future Pokemon content. And this is just talking about Sword and Shield in general. We're not even going to the rest of the Pokemon world with all these possibilities, but yeah, I would really like to see a Sword and Shield sequel at some point in time. I'm just saying. And it doesn't even stop there either. Like, we've got all these characters that are developing and growing, but it doesn't even stop there, because two other things that happen in Sword and Shield at the end of the game are that Rose gets arrested. He just straight up gets arrested, and then we meet two other villain type of characters in Swordward and Shieldbert. And the interesting thing about Rose getting arrested is that most of the time when you beat the evil team leaders, or the evil teams, they basically just disband and the leader disappears and basically goes into hiding or something to that effect. Most of the time they don't get arrested. Like, that was even like a subject of Black and White's post-game is that Looker's trying to track down the Seven Sages, and he basically arrests them, but I don't think he finds Getsus. But other than that, basically, it's that situation where they disband, leader goes into hiding, and that's it. So the fact that Rose was specifically mentioned to be arrested is interesting, because that gives you a reason to kind of like leave him alone in the sequel. And then it's just so utterly convenient that in the post game, they introduce two new villains that are very, very pompous, and they make you hate them very, very easily. And it would really, really like, they are the type of character, even though they sort of have their own arc that gets completed in the post game, it's obviously very brief, very short, and so they are very much still the type of character that could be fleshed out as the main villain of a sequel game if that were indeed to happen. And the way that Pokemon could do that is, I mean, you could do it a couple of different ways, because another thing that kind of got like very briefly touched upon but wasn't fully developed was the Macrocosmos company, which is basically Chairman Rose's company. They ended up towards the end of the game as kind of the true evil team, because obviously Rose is the main villain, Macrocosmos is his company, and then you start to basically fight and battle some grunts like towards the end there that truly act like evil team grunts, because Team Yell, even though they're the evil team of this game, they don't really act like those evil team grunts we know and love, but Macrocosmos does. So I feel like you could actually take them and basically roll with them and roll their development once again at the end of the game. All this is happening at the end of the game, almost as if it's setting up a sequel, and you could really have them come into their own in a sequel where now they are the evil team. Team Yell can still be around, but they're not the villains anymore. They're just kind of like, they know you, they're there for Marnie, like, they're cheering for Marnie at the gym, so they're not really involved in terms of like trying to disrupt you. Now it's Macrocosmos, they've come into their own, and you could almost even kind of like do another gold and silver type of situation where Macrocosmos are trying to get Chairman Rose out of jail, and so they're going ham trying to like cause havoc and everything like that. I think that would be fantastic. And the way that you could even incorporate Swordward and Shieldbert into this is that naturally, when it comes to follow-up games, obviously it's usually a third title of some kind. So if the sequel game was going to, in effect, be that third title, that Ultra Sun and Moon, that Platinum, that Emerald, basically you could introduce a third brother into the mix. And his name would naturally, of course, have to be Gunther, because this game would, of course, be called Pokemon Gun. But you introduce a third brother. He steps in as kind of the new president of Macrocosmos, if you will, similar to like what's his name? His name is escaping me. The Team Rocket admin that steps in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Gold and Silver. It starts with an A. It's like, it's not Alistair. It's I'm gonna look this up because this is kind of who is it? It's not Alistair. I don't know who it is. I can't remember. Wow. Pokemon names typically don't slip my mind that easily. But you have in Sword and Shield, or not Sword and Shield, you have in Team Rocket the admin who takes over as the leader. This could be the same way with the third Swordward and Shieldbert brother. He could basically be the new boss as they're trying to get Rose out of prison. And then Swordward and Shieldbert could be admins of the team. And I think this would work because obviously these guys market themselves as very regal, as very high class, and that's what Rose is as well. So it makes sense that they would have the power to kind of take over the company. Or you could just do both of those completely separate. You could do a storyline where Swordward and Shieldbert, and once again maybe possibly a third brother, are doing their own thing and Macrocosmos isn't involved. Or you could do a Macrocosmos thing where Macrocosmos is the focus and the brothers aren't involved, but they're still doing that thing that I mentioned, trying to get Rose out of jail. There's just so many options that Sword and Shield give a potential sequel that, once again, like I said, it's literally as if it's pushing towards a sequel intentionally. Like, it looks as it, like, you could make anything a sequel, once again. Like, you could take any Pokemon game and develop it and make it look like it's like there's continuity in that story that was always planned from the start. You could definitely do that. But with Sword and Shield individually, it just looks like it was made for a sequel. The way it ends looks like it was made to continue on. Like, it just would be so unbelievably perfect, and I just really want it to happen. And I gotta say, even though, once again, I'm excited for the expansion, I'm kind of sad that it's not going to continue. But before we continue, I just want to give another shout out to the Tax Defense Group. Make sure to check them out. Call them at 800-850-7973. Mention you heard this ad. They can help you get your taxes done for a really good deal. Same thing with Writer Junkie. Give them a holler at 805-587-7966. They can hit you up and give you a great resume for a really good price. Just make sure you mention that you heard their ad on UCast Studios. But with that being said, once again, it leaves me in a really weird spot, because I definitely am amongst that crowd that really want to see I really want to see more Pokemon games get sequels, because we've had Black and White 2, which is really the only true sequel we've ever had. We've had Gold and Silver, which is sort of a pseudo-sequel that directly continues the story, but does it with completely new characters and a completely new setting, so a lot of it is original, even though it is a sequel at the same time. So, man, it would just be great. It would just be great to see how those stories would ultimately pan out. It's just something I would really love to see. I would genuinely like it a lot. So, you know, I have some more time that I can eat up, because we really haven't been going that long. I definitely have some more time, but that is essentially my argument for a sequel. Is like, I feel like I've said everything I can say on this subject. It would be fantastic. It would be amazing. It's perfectly written for it. The development is there. It would be amazing, and I feel like that's the gist. So I'm not quite going to end yet, but I feel like that's all I can say on that subject. So as we kind of wind down this episode of the podcast, I want you guys to kind of think about what you think about all of this stuff. Like, do you agree with me that it would be perfect for a sequel? Do you feel like the ideas that I'm proposing would be really good? Let me know in the comments below if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, come check us out on YouTube and subscribe. If you're listening in other places, that's totally fine too. Be sure to follow there as well. But yeah, I definitely want to hear all of your thoughts about this if you can. And then if you have any other ideas as well. Obviously, this type of thing has unlimited potential, so I would definitely love to hear any other ideas you guys might have as well. And with that being said, I think that's about it. I genuinely think it does. It's going to be a shorter episode today, unfortunately, but yeah, I think that is my argument. Like, I can't really make it any better than that Sword and Shield 2 should have been a thing, although Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra are looking to be pretty dang fantastic themselves. So, once again, if you guys enjoyed the podcast, thank you for listening. Please leave a like, follow wherever you're listening, let me know your thoughts, and I will be back with another episode next Friday. I'm not quite sure. Once again, I kind of just feel it out as I go in terms of episode topics. Sometimes things happen the Thursday before I gotta record, and then that's my topic. Other times it's like this, where there's nothing really going on, so I'm actually going to talk about something that is more kind of akin to what I would talk about on my own channel. It's just going to be like a original piece of content, because I never repeat myself between shows. I don't repeat what I say here over on my channel, and I don't repeat what I say on my channel here, just so we can keep it original and just keep the content flowing, essentially, so we're not recycling stuff. So, Either way, regardless of what direction we take in next week's episode, it's going to be fantastic, so you're definitely not going to want to miss it. So be sure to follow. As I said, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Weekend's finally here. Hallelujah, thank goodness. And with all that being said, yeah, I will see you guys next week. Be sure to check me out on my own channel if you want more Pokemon content. And if you can't possibly wait another week to hear my voice, I know that is just so unreasonable for me to ask. But with all that being said, I love you guys very much. Thank you once again for listening, and I will smell you guys later.